I had my first anxiety attack since I got saved about 2 weeks ago. And, for those of you that don't know my story, basically, I had depression and anxiety for years from about the 8th grade till I was a junior in high school. And it was like crippling anxiety and depression. No one knew about it. I would come home and I had a hard time paying attention and doing my homework. I would go into my room and I would lay down and just be sad and be depressed. And I try to lose myself in things like sports and people pleasing and other vices, and it just never did enough to numb the pain. So when I was 17, I planned on taking my life because I thought that was the only way to get the crippling anxiety and depression to go away. And so the night I was going to take my life, I went to Waffle House to have my last meal. Jesus encountered me, revealed himself to me, and so I prayed a wild prayer. I said, Jesus, if you're real, take away my crippling anxiety and depression, because this is the reason why I wanted to make an irrevocable decision with my life. And so from that day, I hadn't had the crippling anxiety or depression up until about 2 weeks ago. And, even from that moment, right, I've had moments where anxiety has attempted to creep on me, or sadness has tried to creep on me, right? But I'm talking like the crippling anxiety and depression that I used to battle with for years before I was a Christian, I hadn't had since that day I got saved up until 2 weeks ago. And it was almost like I had forgotten what that felt like. I had forgotten what it felt like to be bedridden, to have this heavy, incredible, crushing feeling on my chest, where my mind is racing and I couldn't even focus. I couldn't even think. I had seen someone I had experienced hurt from in public a couple weeks ago, and my whole body began to shut down. I just started to kind of freak out on the inside, and I started to shake. And I remember, I remember I said hey to this person just to, interact with them and attempt to love them. And I almost burst into tears when I said hello, just because the anxiety and the weight on my shoulders was so heavy. And if I'm being completely honest, I remember when I began to experience the anxiety and depression, Satan came into my head and just began to call me a hypocrite. I remember sitting there 2 weeks ago, going home, and just like, I remember just feeling like a hypocrite, because it was like, oh man, like from that night at Waffle House, I haven't had the crippling anxiety, I haven't had the crippling depression up until that moment. And it's like, man, Bryce, you're a hypocrite. Everything you've thought, everything you've taught, everything you've believed, you're just a hypocrite. And that's it. And I remember just being bedridden. Like I'm not the type of guy to like, soak in anxiety and sadness, since that day. But like I didn't wake up until 4 p.m. I didn't get out of bed until 7 p.m. the next day. Like I wasn't talking to anyone. I was just in my room and I couldn't think. And I could not get out of my head that the fact that I felt like a hypocrite, I felt like a fraud, I felt like a fool, man, the feelings I felt were unreal. And as I began to get myself out of bed, I got myself out of bed finally at 7 o'clock at night the next day. And I remember getting out of bed and I was going on a run. And while I was on the run, I just couldn't help but think, man, like these past 4 years, like God set me free of my crippling anxiety and depression. And then it just happens in a moment. And I'm just like this big hypocrite. And right when I'm beginning to believe this lie from the devil that I'm a hypocrite because I had an anxiety attack, I just hear this still voice of the Lord just whisper in my ear and say, Bryce, you're not a hypocrite. You're just human. And when I heard that from the Lord, it was like this weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I remembered that I had this dependency I needed on Jesus. Now, after I got back from the run, I went to the Word, and there's a proverb that says, anxiety weighs a man's heart down, but a good word makes his heart glad again. And that good word is Jesus Christ, the gospel, the blood of Christ, atoning for, covering the sins of humanity, the suffering of humanity, past, present, and future. And I just began to sit here and think, man, God, maybe did I lose myself for a second? Maybe I thought I was the man because I hadn't struggled with depression and anxiety that was crippling for years. And then this moment happened, and it was a reminder that I was supposed to be, I didn't really know where I was at. I'm still kind of trying to fully understand and process that whole time, because every time I think about it or I talk about it, I get I have these emotional waves where I'm just I want to cry and I want to laugh and then I want to be serious because it was such an interesting feeling, because I hadn't dealt with it in so long. But when I heard that phrase from the Lord, when I was just drowning in shame, you're not a hypocrite, you're just human. I then, after I read the proverb, I turned to Corinthians, where we read Paul. Paul wrote about a thorn in his flesh. We don't know if it was a sin struggle. We don't know if it was, a spiritual warfare. And, Paul's kind of complaining. He's kind of like, man, why do I have this thing in my side? And then he kind of ends out the thought with, even though I have this thorn in my flesh, I'm grateful because it keeps me humble and reliant on God. So when I had this anxiety attack that I haven't had or experienced in over 4 years, and then I get to this moment where I'm bedridden, on my back, crying in my bed, wondering, man, why am I experiencing this crippling anxiety and depression? Why did I shut down? Why was my body shaking? And, feeling shame that I had anxiety, feeling guilty that I had an anxiety attack, and then just hearing the voice of the Lord say, man, Bryce, you're not a hypocrite, you're just human. And then the reminder of going, man, I need Jesus. I think sometimes as Christians, we can get lost in the sauce, kind of, right? Following Jesus, we got our faith in him, life is going well from the outside, or maybe you haven't dealt with the things that you haven't dealt with in a long time. Maybe you haven't struggled with things that you haven't struggled with in a long time, so maybe there was a part of my heart that I didn't see, that I was blind to, that God was revealing and saying, hey, you still need to depend on me here. You still need to lean on me here. And there was just this newfound freedom. It took me 2 days to get out of this funk. And you know what got me out of the funk was John chapter 15 is what got me out of the funk. John chapter 15. I'm the vine and you're the branches. Abide in me and I in you. Basically, remain in me. And there's this verse that kind of sticks out in the middle of this whole incredible chapter, where Jesus says, already you've been made clean by the word I've spoken to you. And then it goes back into this analogy of the vine and the branches. And I was just reminded, the only way Bryce is going to remain in God's love is if I know I've been made clean by the gospel. If I know that I've been made clean by the blood of Jesus, I will be able to remain in his love. I will be able to remain on the rock. I will be able to trust in him. And when I read that, there was just this beautiful peace that overwhelmed me. Again, you're not a hypocrite. You're a human. Bryce, trust in me. Lean on me in every aspect. Even the things that you think You fully accomplished. I felt like Jesus was speaking to me saying, you still need to lean on me. Don't think you've just graduated from things you haven't dealt with in years or in a while. You still need to lean on him in every aspect, way, shape, or form. And so the reason why I wanted to, share that I had this anxiety attack that I hadn't had in 4 years was hopefully to encourage you, like, man, I'm human. You're human. Sometimes you go through things that are unexpected. Sometimes you deal with things that you haven't dealt with in a while. And Satan can come creep in your ear with a megaphone, amplifying your issues, amplifying the shame and guilt, and making you feel like a hypocrite. But in reality, Satan is just a kitty cat in the corner with a megaphone. And the word that is louder and more powerful than what Satan says about you, your circumstance, your situation, is what Jesus says about you. And what Jesus says about you is that the blood of Jesus Christ and the grace of God can overwhelm you in such a magnificent way where you are made clean, forgiven, righteous, justified, and the peace of God is what leads you and not the shame of the devil. And I found so much freedom in knowing that I'm human and I need Jesus. Recognizing you're human does not mean you excuse yourself to go sin. Recognizing you're human means that you're hopeless and helpless and need to depend on someone outside of yourself, which is Jesus. And if we can keep that heart posture of being human, like, man, God, I am hopeless without you. I need you. You're all I want. I want everything you have to offer. That's the point. That is the point. Sorry I haven't made a video on the Bryce's Diary in a while, but I wanted to share this and just be real and honest. Because we deal with stuff sometimes, and that's okay. But I love you guys. It's good to see you guys. I have videos coming back on this account soon. Been traveling a lot. It's been fun. God is great. I love Jesus. Jesus has been good to me. I pray you are well. Love you guys, and I'll see you guys next time I post. I randomly post on this account, so I'll see you guys another time soon. All right. Peace.